Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I wanted to bring a list video to all of the new or prospective comic book readers out there. So to that end, we're going to be looking at 10 Marvel Comics recommendations for new readers. I'm trying to get this out in the first month of the year. I might just barely make it, but I wanted to do a video again, just being a little bit more user-friendly to newer comic book fans. I'm a huge Marvel comic fanboy, so I thought I'd start with Marvel. Before we jump into the list though, I do want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in the video description, and if you see something you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order today. Please note if you use my affiliate code or link to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with my Marvel recommendation list. First up today, in no particular order, we're going to be going with Spider-Man Blue by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. I think that this is such a fantastic Marvel comic for a new reader out there because I think it encapsulates so much of what makes Spider-Man great. It's a maybe 5-issue, give or take, miniseries that really tells the story of Spider-Man kind of eulogizing and remembering a lost love of his life at a period when he was first really stepping into that mantle of Spider-Man and finding his place in the world. He's remembering his lost love, and each of the issues is kind of an episode of his memory at a time in his life when, like I said, things were new. This was his first great love, and he lost her fighting a supervillain. This is a really big, prolific event in the life of Peter Parker, the Amazing Spider-Man, and this series, Spider-Man Blue, is this really sweetly melancholy examination of life, love, and loss. I really love the artwork from the late, great Tim Sale here. It's just some of his best, in my opinion. I love this guy's work in Long Halloween, that Batman title. He also has a couple other series at Marvel like this. Some of my favorites are Daredevil Yellow and Hulk Gray. I've reviewed a few of these, if not all of them, on the channel, but this one in particular really stands out to me. I think it's a great way to experience Spider-Man for the first time. I do think if you like this book, there's a good chance you will like other Spider-Man titles. I think that this book is also a really good throwback to the Silver Age of comic books, as it features kind of events or homages to that period. There really is a lot to love here, and frankly, you don't need to know a ton about Spider-Man's history or mythos to really still enjoy this story. And only a couple issues, it really does read pretty zippily as well, so it's a low commitment for those that just want to check out this book. Admittedly, I am a huge Spider-Man fan, but this is among my favorite of his titles, and just one of the best comics I've ever had the pleasure of reading. I really love it, and I think that new readers or prospective Spider-Man readers out there would certainly get a lot out of it as well. Don't sleep on Spider-Man Blue. Next up today, we have Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and David Aja. This is considered one of the better modern Marvel comic book runs of all time, and to me, it really stands out from the pack as something truly distinctive. What I mean by that is that the artwork is very stylistic and cool. There is a kind of minimalism in David Aja's style that I just thoroughly love reading this run. I know for me as well, it's not an overly long run. Here I have a kind of standard size big paperback. They also have omnibus editions and other ways to collect this book, but I loved it. I burned through this cover to cover, and it was so easy to do so. You might be thinking, why is Hawkeye one of your big recommendations? What's the big deal? Well, if you've never read this title, I could easily see why you may think that, but frankly, this has a lot going for it. The whole storyline is essentially what Hawkeye does when he's not with the Avengers off saving the world. We have him still kind of crusading for justice, but really in his local community, even down to his kind of apartment complex. We also have him mentoring the younger Hawkeye, the woman who's taken on the mantle as well, Kate Bishop. And this dynamic between Clint Barton, the original Hawkeye, and Kate Bishop is really a huge selling point for this series. There is kind of this interesting friendship dynamic between them, sometimes father-daughter dynamics, sometimes not really clear, but it just really works. There's a lot of humor and just really deep-hearted moments here, but one of my favorite aspects of it is it has this kind of slice-of-life quality. There are some kind of humdrum, just personal moments in this series that really made it feel authentic, organic, lived in. I felt like really Matt Fraction and David Aja was just letting us take kind of surveillance into the lives of these characters, and they felt real. We didn't have as many larger superhero tights and flights heroics. We had just these kind of stripped back personal stories, and it really, really worked. I think combining the storytelling with the beautiful visuals, this is really just packs a punch, and I think it's a great way to experience the Marvel Universe. I also think it's fantastic for new readers, as you don't really need to know a ton about the universe or the characters much at all to enjoy. Next on our list, we have Daredevil, the Man Without Fear by Frank Millar and John Romita Jr. So this is admittedly a very old paperback edition. It has since been printed in much better hardcovers, other paperbacks, part of an omnibus edition, the Frank Millar Companion Omnibus for Daredevil. Anyway, this just happens to be my copy, but this is a fantastic story. If you don't know much about Frank Millar, he's written some really prolific comic books like Batman Year One, we have Batman The Dark Knight Returns over at DC, just to name a few, but basically this is the Batman Year One treatment just for Daredevil. What I mean by that is it's a retelling and kind of modernizing of the origin story for the titular character, and frankly, this is my definitive Daredevil origin story, and it still is set apart for me as one of the best Daredevil stories of all time. If you're newer to the channel, you might not know Daredevil is actually my favorite comic book superhero character, and this is just a really great way to get in on the ground floor of this character. Because it's Frank Millar, he's added some of the elements that we've come to love on Daredevil as well, like his trainer, Stick, the hand, we have Elektra showing up here in this origin story, beautiful artwork by John Romita Jr. Romita isn't always my favorite artist, but honestly, this is some of the best I've ever seen from him, and I love the storytelling here. It is, yes, a Daredevil origin story, but we have him all the way through when he's first taking on that mantle, and honestly, it really works. It's a very character-grounded story, it's cinematic, it's wonderful, it's at times moody or tense, ton of action, ton of great character moments, and I'm tempted to call it a timeless classic. I absolutely love this story. Someday I'm hoping to get it in that omnibus edition. I think they're reprinting it later this year. But for right now, I love my beaten up old paperback. I've read this a good handful of times, I believe, and I just love it. Don't miss out on Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. For me, it's one of the best ways to start reading this character, and I recommend it to anyone trying to get into Marvel Comics. Really, really a stand-up book. Next on our list of Marvel recommendations, I have to talk about House of X Powers of 10 by Jonathan Hickman. So admittedly, this is a more modern Marvel comic. I try to diversify this list a little bit, sometimes going back with older school comics, sometimes more modern, but there's a reason I'm picking this for new readers, and here it is. This is the more modern era of X-Men comics. I think X-Men is a really beloved franchise between the animated series, this huge film franchise, video games, and of course the comic books, but it can be really daunting to figure out where to start reading X-Men. Because of the nature of the X-Men universe, with all of these different X books, titles, characters, it almost feels like its own comic book universe. It's that vast. And because a lot of X-Men books as well deal with several subplots going on all at the same time, and this whole franchise has been going on for decades and decades, this title in particular at Marvel, in my mind, is one of the hardest to jump into without getting totally lost or completely daunted by all the stuff you're supposed to already know. And in comes House of X Powers of 10. Now, this might be a controversial pick for new readers, but I want to justify it a little bit. In my mind, this is a resetting of the status quo within the X-Men universe. So no, you don't get a ton of insight on who all of these characters are. I think you are expected to know who most of them are at this point, but I don't think you need to know all the continuity to jump and onboard in with this title. Because this book really sets up the Krakoa era, it's this whole new era for all of the X-Men books that might be getting its end here pretty soon. But anyway, instead of having Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, where Professor X is kind of teaching all of these new mutants kind of how to hang out, they battle Magneto, blah, 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 that's not really going on here. We don't really have that. No, instead, the mutants have kind of created their own nation state with the island of Krakoa, and they've become an international superpower and people group in their own right. This is also completely allied, once adversarial mutants with each other. We have Xavier and Magneto on the same side, for example. It's a really fantastic story that, again, it resets the status quo, and I think it's really good and accessible for people that want to break into something new for X-Men. Next up, in a recent read for me, Venom by Donny and Ryan Stegman. This is the omnibus here that contains their entire run, including the events Absolute Carnage and The King in Black. For me, I think that this is a fantastic way to begin reading Marvel Comics, as it's one of the modern comic run bests in my opinion. This is a run that got a lot of publicity in the last, 5 years or so, and honestly, there's great reason for it. It's a terrific book. It has kind of a darker edge as well, so for maybe more adult or teen readers out there who want to check out Marvel Comics, but maybe don't like the traditional superhero stuff, this has some superheroics, but honestly, it's more of a gritty character story following Eddie Brock, but it has a surprising amount of hope and light in it as well. Frankly, it's amazing everything that Donny Cates was able to balance with this run. I felt things for these characters I've never felt before. He absolutely lore-builded for Venom. I think it really honored some of the previous runs in Venom's history while also just blazing a whole new trail. I think you can read it as a brand new reader without knowing much at all about this character, and I think it'll fill in enough of the gaps that you can absolutely enjoy it without being lost. I think it's a terrific book that has a fantastic villain, and the art is just gorgeous throughout, as you can see even as I'm flipping through this book. Again, I'm a little bit caught on this book right now. It was one of the best books I've read in recent memory, and I just think that there's a whole batch of new readers that maybe want to check out Marvel Comics, are not sure what to get. This might be up the alley for you. It's a really great series. I highly recommend it, and I do think it's really palatable and easy to read for brand new comic book readers. And hey, if you're enjoying this video and you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I just would like to encourage you to do so. I'm always doing top 10 lists, comic book reviews, sometimes comic book hauls and other things like that. Anyway, thank you for considering. Now let's keep going with today's list. Next on my recommendations list for new readers, one of my absolute favorites, Ultimate Spider-Man by Bryan Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley. I've talked about this series several times before on the channel. I believe I've even reviewed this first omnibus, but this is one of my favorite definitive ways to start reading comics. If you're a fan of our favorite wall crawler, just culturally, and you don't even know where to get started, this is one of the first places I would point you to. With a couple quick caveats. This is not in the mainstream Marvel 616 universe. It takes place in an alternate universe called the Marvel Ultimate Universe. I can't remember the number right now. I'm sure someone in the comments will remember. At any rate, this really gets in at the ground floor of Spider-Man. It has its own issue 1, and it's basically a modernization of the Spider-Man mythos for the early 2000s. You can go into this completely blind, not knowing anything about Spider-Man, and be right at home. You won't be missing out on anything, but if you are a longer time fan, you will notice some great homages and kind of parallel universe version of different favorite Spider-Man characters or story arcs, and it was all done really masterfully well by Bryan Michael Bendis and the artist Mark Bagley. This is a series 2 that takes place back when Peter Parker is still in high school, but it just really works. The characters are so likable. We have a several issue origin story. Instead of part of one issue, we actually have 6 issues that kind of portray the Spider-Man origin. But yeah, this series just really works. And if you can get over the fact that this is not in the 616 universe, honestly, this might be right up your alley. I think it's great for brand new readers, and I think that this is a series that I can go back to again and again and get something new out of it just about every time. It's a great run as well for having a beginning, middle, and ending for all intents and purposes. It essentially leads into the Miles Morales era of Spider-Man or Ultimate Spider-Man, but you have a really great beginning, middle, and end with this series. I think it was maybe 120 issues, 150 issues, something like that. Not a small run, but one worth the investment, and again, a great thing to recommend to new readers out there. Next on my Marvel recommendation list for new readers, The Ultimates by Mark Millar and Bryan Hitch. Today we're looking at the Omnibus edition that has their entire run on this title. Like the Ultimate Spider-Man I just spoke about, this is also set in Marvel's Ultimate Universe, not the mainstream 616 universe. But like Ultimate Spider-Man, it's perfectly accessible to brand new readers. This again was an attempt to modernize, in this case, the Avengers books, with this team, the Ultimates over here in the Ultimate Universe. universe. This is also a great read for those that really like the Marvel Cinematic Universe film franchise. It's clearly an inspiration for that entire universe, and I really adore it. Some of the central characters we have here: Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, we have Ant-Man, we have the Wasp, amongst some other characters. But ultimately, this omnibus really has two larger story arcs that are all 12 issues each, give or take, and it's just a fantastic read. This was one of the earlier comic series I've ever read, but I think it's a great way to break into not only Marvel comic books, but an Avengers team-like book. I also think that this is a great gateway comic for those that maybe love the movies, love the TV shows, and have no idea where to start reading the comics. This is a really great place to start. Because it's pretty self-contained with 24-ish issues, you can read it pretty zippily and feel like you enjoyed the ride. I love the kind of cinematic feel of the artwork from Bryan Hitch, and I think, like I said, because they're in issue 1, because it's a brand new story in this universe, you don't really need to know any backstory or anything like that, which means it's prime for new comic readers. I will say these came out, I believe, in the early 2000s. Some of the language or some of the details are a little bit dated even now, but it does feel more modern than something like the Silver Age counterparts, and honestly, I still think it's one of the best ways to get into an Avengers book. Definitely check out The Ultimates by Mark Millar and Bryan Hitch. Okay, I have another X-Men recommendation for all of you, especially if you're new readers. This time we're looking at Astonishing X-Men by Joss Whedon and John Cassaday. I've talked about this series before as well, and if you didn't like my House of X Powers of 10 recommendation, this is another great way to start reading X-Men in a more modern era. I think it's a great jumping on point, and in particular this omnibus, it has kind of a previously on X-Men couple of pages that basically fill in some of the main story bits from the X-Men mythos you maybe need to know before jumping into this book. I think for an X-Men title in general, it's one of the most easily accessible. It is kind of its own self-contained run. It takes place after Grant Morrison's time on X-Men, but you don't need to know a ton to still really enjoy the storytelling here. We have kind of a straightforward X-Men team going on all these adventures, fighting villains, and it all just really works. Throughout the run, we have the art of the incredible John Cassaday, who brings his own kind of realism, high detail, and it's just everything I really, really love. I love his work here. I love his work on Planetary over at DC or Wildstorm, whatever. Anyway, some great art here, and I love the writing from Joss Whedon. We really have an accessible X-Men team here. Some of my favorite mutants are on this book as well, like Wolverine, we got Cyclops, the Beast, Kitty Pryde, Emma Frost, and even Colossus. This was one of my first X-Men books I ever had the pleasure of reading, and I remember feeling, especially after enjoying the films, not totally lost. I was familiar with a lot of the characters from those movies, and I was able to jump into this book with really little understanding of any continuity and still really love the ride. This omnibus and this comic book run in general have maybe 4 major story arcs, I would say, in this collection, but they all read very, very quickly. I think it's really contemporary language. It's easy not to get bogged down. I think the momentum and pacing is really fantastic. And like I said, even as an art book, it's just jaw-droppingly beautiful to behold. I think it's a great thing for new readers, and if you're a longtime X-Men fan and you've missed it somehow, I still encourage you to pick up Astonishing X-Men. Okay, we're getting near the end of the list, and I could not recommend Marvel books without recommending a Silver Age great. To that end, I'm going to be talking today about Fantastic Four by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Flipping through today, we have Omnibus Volume 1 that collects the maybe first 40 or so issues of Fantastic Four. I'm sure I don't have to tell most of you out there what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did in this comic book transformed the entire comic book landscape forever. We didn't have these idealized figures. No, we had essentially a dysfunctional family, mutated or changed by these cosmic rays, cosmic radiation, and becoming something more. This is a premier superhero team book, but it just reads so well. Yes, it is a bit dated, coming back all the way at the dawn of the Silver Age of comic books, but it still really works, and to me it's one of my favorite picks for new readers who want to go all the way back to some of the origins of these big name comic books. To me, it really has withstood the test of time and still is just a ton of fun to read. In particular, yes, it's not only good for superhero comic book fans, but I would say if you're a fan of science fiction literature or frankly the genre in general, it really works as a science fiction book as well. I love this omnibus. I think it is out of print at this time, but you can can still find some of these issues in Epic collections or other formats. I know digital as well. It is a really great book that I like to recommend to new readers, and I didn't want this whole list to go by without recommending a Silver Age book, because that's where so much of Marvel got its start, and I think some of those comics still really hold up. And if you're like me, you like to go back to the very beginning. That's actually how I began my comic book journey back in the day. I found the cheapest possible reprints I could of some of these Silver Age classics, and I just jumped right in. I don't regret doing that. It's really given me an appreciation for these early and older school comic books, and to this day, I still really enjoy them. I couldn't do a Marvel comic book recommendation for new readers list and not include a Silver Age book, and today it's going to be Fantastic Four. And last, but certainly not least on my list of Marvel comic book recommendations for new readers, we're going to be talking about Silver Surfer by Dan Slott, Mike, and Laura Allred. This is a fantastic series. You can find the whole run in, I think, 4 trade paperbacks, or you can find this Omnibus edition here, single issues, digital, what have you. I have the Omnibus, and I am absolutely in love. I had a chance to review this book not too long ago on the channel, and I just think it's a visually striking piece of fiction that I think is perfect for brand new readers. Admittedly, I am a big fan of Silver Surfer. It's a great read for science fiction fans, people that like kind of more philosophical, broody kind of books, but this is really something different, and I think it's much more accessible to new readers out there. It really feels like its own standalone work. I think you can read this omnibus or this run as a one-and-done kind of read, and if you're just trying to break into Marvel Comics, and again, you don't like just the standard superhero kind of genre, I think there might still be something in here for you. Yes, we have some superheroics, but it's so much more than that. This run by Dan Slott is really a love story. It's an interplanetary science fiction kind of adventure epic, and it just really works. The art from Mike and Laura Allred is kind of animated, beautiful. I love the stylization of these artists. Mike is the kind of penciler, and Laura, his wife, does the coloring, but this dynamic duo presents what is largely an art book in my mind. It's absolutely stunning, and to have these creators set loose on a kind of galaxy of just different alien cultures and planets and races, it's just really, really fun. And Dan Slott really does make this so fun for new readers. You don't need to have a ton of backstory. Anything you do need to know about the Silver Surfer, he readily explains in context of the storytelling, and like I said, it feels like its own self-contained narrative. If you don't want the standard superhero fare, but still want to dive into Marvel, and you do like a little bit of a love story, there's maybe no better place I could recommend to you to start Marvel than Silver Surfer by Dan Slott, Mike Allred, and Laura Allred. A really great book. Definitely recommend. And I think that's going to round out my list today for 10 Marvel Comics recommendations for new readers. Like I said, I was hoping to do a new reader-based video in the month of January. I think I just made it, but I hope you enjoyed it. I may try to do one for DC Comics later, but I really wanted, again, to make it accessible to newer or prospective readers, whether you're just starting your journey with comic books or you're thinking about it and you want to break into Marvel Comics. These are just a couple recommendations I'd recommend to you. If you don't want to start with an Omnibus, I know some of these you can find at a library in different editions, depending on where you live. You can find digitally sometimes for a pretty discounted rate. There are so many ways to find these books, but these are just some of my favorite go-tos that I think about fondly as a new reader. What can they really just sink their teeth into? I tried to vary my recommendations a bit between modern and a little bit older. I tried to vary the recommendations as well, kind of genre-wise or what you're getting, because I know there are so many different kinds of readers out there. Anyway, I'm sure there are many Marvel comics for new readers I have missed in this video, so what are some of your favorite Marvel reads that you would recommend to brand new readers out there? I would love to get all your recommendations below so that people that just want to kind of cherry pick this video and maybe read the comments can find a wealth of great recommendations beyond just me. Anyway, would really love that, or to hear from you in general, or maybe you've read some of these books and you just want to talk about it. Let me know all of that in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, that comment we talked about, and maybe check out one of my other videos. Until next time, have a good one.